Welcome to another episode of MDM Bytes. I'm Malcolm Hawker with Prophecy Software. It's Friday for me, so I'm in a really good mood. That means that I'm pumped to talk about data fabric. Yes, we're going to talk about what is a data fabric. Now, you may be asking yourself, Malcolm, what does that have to do with MDM? This is a series about MDM. Yes, it is a series about MDM, and I believe that you cannot do a data fabric without MDM. And I'm not alone on that. And we'll certainly talk about the whys. But I would love to spend just a little bit of time talking about what is a data fabric, what isn't a data fabric, trying to cut through some of the hype related to data fabrics. Now, I come at my knowledge fairly honestly here. While I was an analyst at Gartner, I was involved in creating some of the data fabric narrative, shall we say. I was involved in peer reviewing data fabric related research and was heavily involved in the creation of much of what you see online related to data fabric today. So I was talking with clients, I was talking with architects, I was talking with fellow analysts. I've got a pretty good and pretty solid knowledge base when it comes to data fabric. What are the things that you should know about first? Well, first and foremost, we are talking about a very immature, and that's okay to say that, it's an evolving technology that is very, very, very early in its overall life cycle. That means we're talking about a level of penetration within the market here around the 3 to 5% mark. That means that literally, guys, there are a handful of companies on the planet that have a data fabric right now. So that means that if there are vendors out there saying, hey, buy my data fabric, that's a red flag and proceed with caution. Because that's kind of point number 2 here, which is you can't go buy a data fabric. At least not yet. And we'll talk about the whys here in a minute. But right now, data fabric, as defined at least by Gartner and many, many others, including me, data fabric is a collection of existing technologies and existing capabilities that today don't exist as a single solution. They just don't. And again, we'll talk about why. So beware of any vendor saying that they can sell you a data fabric, because they can't. Data fabrics right now, especially given where they are in their life cycle, are very much a DIY enterprise. It just is how it is. Let's get into a diagram here. I'll share a high level kind of my view of what is a data fabric. All right, here it is in all of its glory. So what are the key kind of foundations of a data fabric? Well, the number one foundation of a data fabric, and I would argue the reason, the key thing that is missing from what vendors are today saying they have from the perspective of capabilities related to data fabric, is really the kind of the thing in the middle here that I'm calling a graph and AI-enabled semantic and governance layer. And yes, that is a massive mouthful. I acknowledge that. But that is one of the key components that I would argue is missing from the data fabric today. I would also argue that the notion of what Gartner calls active metadata is largely missing from most solutions today. So what is a data fabric? Well, a data fabric, I would say, if you were to kind of peel the onion and get down to the kind of the core concepts of the data fabric, first and foremost, it's an architectural pattern for managing data. Right. So that's the short answer. It is an architectural pattern for managing and governing data. But when you kind of peel the onion on this, what you see is that data fabrics are all about getting to a point where data informs its own classification and use. That's really, really important. If somebody were to ask me at a dinner party or out at a pub, what's a data fabric? I would say it's a data management architecture where the data itself informs its classification and use. That also means that the data starts informing its own governance rules, which is an important aspect of data fabric. Where does this all start? Well, it starts at the bottom of this diagram, of course, with data sources, right? And the next foundational level up is this notion of metadata. So creating some sort of metadata repository. So yes, there are a lot of data catalog vendors out there saying that they can sell you a data fabric. Well, they can't sell you a data fabric. They can sell you an important component of a data fabric. Where metadata is being extracted into these repositories, either virtually or physically, right? Data virtualization vendors, data integration vendors are another cadre of vendors that are saying that they can sell you a data fabric. And like data catalog vendors, they're selling you a component of a data fabric, but they're not selling you the entire data fabric. Then keep moving up, you get into this AI and graph-enabled semantic layer that really doesn't exist yet. If you ask Gartner, I think this is their longer-term vision for this evolving market that they're calling the data and analytics governance platform. I was a co-author on that market guide that was published last year related to data and analytics governance platforms. I think that platform will eventually kind of evolve into what I'm calling an AI-enabled graph and semantic layer. But what this is all about is the activation of metadata. That's those blue circles there, where technologies like graph and AI and ML will take this kind of passive metadata, this metadata that exists as a snapshot in time, and they will activate it. Meaning you can use these technologies to start informing, predicting, defining governance rules. You can use the data and you can use these technologies to allow data to start classifying itself, modeling itself, defining itself, where you could get to a point where AI and graph and other technologies were good enough that data itself could say, this data is master data. It's used widely across the organization, and this data is not master data. You could get to a point, conceivably, using a data fabric where data could manage its own quality rules, where you could dip into these metadata repositories, look at troves of transactional data to see when was a transaction successful and when was a transaction not successful. That is a strong indicator of when there's good data quality that maybe is fit for purpose or that is good for that context or use case or application, or where data is not fit for purpose, where the quality may be low. So these are very, very basic examples of where the notion of active metadata, when coupled together with these highly kind of intelligent and learning and trainable kind of AI-driven semantic layer, where you could get to a point where data could start at the beginning augmenting and then eventually automating some of its own management here. That's the kind of the true expression, the ultimate expression of a data fabric, where you could get to that point down the road where data starts to automate its management and automate its use, where you could even have situations where some of these governance rules, some of these policies could be pushed back down into source systems, very much akin to an operational style of MDM. So I think what you'll see with data fabrics is you will see a progression here. They will phase out. Early stage fabrics will be all about augmentation, where most of the rules and the governance and the integration patterns and the quality rules will be defined by humans, as they always have been. But what you will see over time is that we will move from a state of let's just say, maybe 20% augmentation of data to 50 to 60 to 70. We'll get to a point where we will pivot from augmentation of data and to automation of those same business rules. So that's kind of the longer term vision here with data fabric. Let's get back to MDM. Where does that fit in? Well, I would argue you can't do any of this without MDM. I see a future probably at least a decade down the road, guys. I mean, we're talking at least 5 to 7 years before any kind of mainstream adoption of a data fabric. I think that's probably even a very aggressive timeline. We're talking probably a decade here. You could see a world maybe in the future where MDM is fully automated in this graph and AI enabled semantic layer. Are we there yet? We are a long way from that. And I think I could even argue a very compelling business case that will never get to full automation from an MDM perspective. So MDM and the management of business rules that are related to shared enterprise-wide data assets, the need for MDM is there today. It will remain there. It's not going away. And it's a critical component of data fabric technology. So we'll get there. We'll get to automation down the road. But for right now, buyer beware. All that glitters is not gold. We're a long way away from the true vision of a data fabric. But I will say, I mean, the kind of the promise here is really strong. There's a lot to be hopeful for from a data fabric perspective.